the combination of technology, investing, and living in Asia, speaking foreign languages, it's just a culmination of everything that I've been doing.
If you talk with a tourist and that person tells you these 10 reasons is why you should go to Asia, what are the reasons 11 to 20?
Okay, so the real reasons why you should be in Thailand are this, is that regardless of what the Western media, news media says about Thailand, Thailand has historically been one of the most forward-looking countries in the region. So if you think, let's go back to 1975. In 1975, there was still the ends of a war in Vietnam. Right, not the Vietnamese people's fault, but there was still the ends and the sort of shards of a war going on there. That war drew into that sort of little satellite Laos and Cambodia as well. And these countries were completely destroyed by this war. But at the same time that those countries were just kind of coming out of this long process of war with the French and the US and the Chinese and all this kind of destruction that was taking place here, the Thais were sitting here going, we should probably open a stock market. Okay, so they've always been very forward-looking, and the government here has always been sort of business-oriented, right? So you look at, like, if I asked you who's the biggest retail player here, two gigantic retail players, the Central Group and the Mall Group. These are very modern, very sophisticated companies that have all the global brands here. Most people don't know that. The other reasons are that, we talked about this earlier, the transportation system is world-class, and that's both above ground and below ground. Okay, there are 21 kind of international style airports in Thailand. There are 3,000 bus stations in Thailand that service the entire country. Okay, but let's move away from the lifestyle stuff and let's talk about business. Thai people are very pragmatic, and regardless of the politics, and I would also argue that the politics in Thailand are way better than they're perceived and presented outside the country. The government here has done an incredibly good job of building the economy bit by bit over the last 50 or 60 years. So if you look at GDP growth and GDP per capita growth since 1953, you'll see that it's been really steady, and then over the last 20 years, it's accelerated massively, okay? And that is really due to a lot of government policies, and one of those policies is laissez-faire. The government itself can argue internally. One of the things they don't do is get in the way of business getting done. They're very open to FDI, foreign direct investment. And for the first time ever, I think in 2013, the Thai as a country actually invested more money externally than was invested internally. So their foreign direct investment external was higher than their FDI internally, which meant that they invested more of their money outside the country than was invested inside the country. And that's going to be a trend.
Do you know where it's normally going?
I don't know, but I can find out. Okay. There's a massive amount of untapped capital in Thailand that's just learning how to take risk. So that's really incredible for business. Thailand sits in the central part of Southeast Asia. So from a business perspective, it's really easy to travel to all the other countries, not to see the islands, but to do business. Okay? Nobody hates the Thai people. In other words, they have not created a universe of hate around them. Nobody wants to fight with them.
Nobody has ever conquered Thailand?
Nobody has ever conquered or annexed or colonized Thailand. The monarchy that exists here is actually very friendly with monarchies globally and other countries globally. They've done a great job of keeping, it's not Switzerland for sure, but again, it's not in the same physical location as Switzerland either. It's not a weak country, it's a very strong country. And like I said, if you look at it from a business perspective, there's no better place to get business done than there is in Thailand. And here's the biggest thing. If you want to create a business in Southeast Asia, it is kind of like the Goldilocks place to do it. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's hard here to get things done. But remember, getting back to my definition, it's relatively hard. But if you can build a business here, moving it to Singapore is in relative terms much easier because Singapore, everyone has a credit card. The infrastructure is like a Western style infrastructure. It's just much easier to move a business here, from here to there. But it's streets harder to move a business from Singapore into Thailand because you haven't learned all of those sort of Southeast Asian intricacies and idiosyncrasies because Singapore itself, while it's physically located in Southeast Asia, the mentality of business is much more Western in style. And the infrastructure is much easier to deal with. The banking system is simpler. You don't learn as much building a business there as you do here. So once you build a business in Bangkok, let's say, or in Thailand, moving that business to Vietnam or moving it to Malaysia or moving it to Indonesia is easier in relative terms than if you built that business originally in Singapore. I see this all the time. You see foreign companies, right, MNCs, multinational companies, set up a base in Singapore and then try to run their business in the rest of Southeast Asia. It's possible, but boy, I think it'd be way easier for them if they committed the same amount of capital in Thailand, paid their Thai staff the same way they pay their Singaporean staff, and built that business here, as opposed to in Singapore. Singapore has how many people there? 5.5 million people.
It's a different market.
It's a much different market.
Probably more money.
They do, but don't underestimate the ability of Thai people and Indonesian people and Malaysian people and Vietnamese people to speak English, program computers, understand UI, UX, design. You know this from being in Vietnam. There's a massive untapped workforce there.
And the main export of Thailand is software, I've heard.
So software, but also, so we didn't talk about this either. So, I mean, Thailand is either the first or second or third largest exporter of rice in the world. And at one point was the largest maker of disk drives in the world. I'm just saying. And so the second largest manufacturer of Japanese cars outside of Japan is Thailand. The first is the United States. So just think about the technical skill, the organizational skills of, they make Toyota, Mazda, Honda, Mitsubishi. The car that I own was built in Thailand. It's a Mitsubishi Pajero. Okay, and you're starting to have, I also own a Vespa. I believe that Vespa may have been manufactured here. If not, it was manufactured in Vietnam. But all of these things that are happening in Thailand that no one knows, that's what I would tell people. That's the 11 through 20 that I would tell people, is that doing business, getting business done, and exporting that business to other parts of the region and globally are things about Thailand that nobody else knows. Yeah?
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And you said it earlier, and I'll repeat it.
Yeah.
There is order inside of chaos here. But just think about the developmental stage of Thailand. So people will say, yeah, but Thailand is really run by 5 big families or 6 big families, right? Sure. But who was running the United States back in the 1910s and 1920s? The Vanderbilts, the Morgans, the Carnegies, the Mellons, the Rockefellers. It's no different at the same, it's not no different, but it's similar enough at the same stage of development of the country. Right? So the Japanese, it's Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, these are all people's names. Right, and Honda, Toyota is a guy's name. I'm just saying.
Mean that other companies cannot make it.
Exactly.
It's not no reason.
And we live in a very unique time where, again, we talked about this earlier with the video company, but it's true for every type of company. The barriers to entry are so low now that you could start a new jeans brand. So there's plenty of room for both the Thai entrepreneurs and the foreign entrepreneurs. There are big development houses here, right? So Jan Jones runs Ozo or Uzu here, a 25, 30 person development house. There's every type of business you can build here and no one's going to get in your way.
How's the education of Thais?
It's really, really good and getting better. And there is, just like in every developing country, there's an educational bifurcation, but it's slow. As people move into the middle class, their families value education more and more. I mean, it's an Asian thing. The Asian families value education. And as they get more and more exposure to the broader world, they want to learn the same things that the rest of the world is learning. And for them to catch up, whether it's computer programming, whether it's learning PHP or learning Ruby on Rails or learning C# or C++ or learning, how to program in Unix, at its core, they want to know, right? And Thai has a history of great design, so they're really good at user interface design and user experience design as well. And
they're artistic, right? I've been to Chiang Mai. There's so many art students there.
Right, but there's also a very robust tech startup ecosystem growing in Chiang Mai, in Phuket, in Khon Kaen. In Phuket. Right, so you went...
Phuket.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it an island or is it a city?
We would say in English in Phuket because it's a city. Yeah. It happens to be an island where you can be on the island, but you can also be in Phuket. It's like this thing why do you get on the plane and in the train? Yeah. Shouldn't you get in the plane? As George Carlin used to say, let the daredevils get on the plane. I'm going to get in the plane. No, I liked it. Yeah, but Thai people are very entrepreneurial. And we're coming around, right? So the whole development of businesses is cyclical. And we're at a point right now where the big companies are no longer the companies that are driving the development in the economy. They're still growing nicely. But the newest companies and the newest ideas are coming from the smallest companies. And I think there's a secular change that's taking place, not just locally, but globally. And I think that's going to continue.
Do you see things that companies do wrong here, or entrepreneurs do wrong in Thailand?
Yeah, I mean, plenty of companies fail. They raise too much money. They spend too much money. They hire the wrong people. They pay themselves too much, or they pay themselves too little.
The usual reasons.
All the normal reasons,
There's
right?
no difference.
There's no difference here between someone who's going to fail and someone who isn't. Now, your entrepreneurial class might be made up more of slightly wealthier people.
Yeah.
But again, all of that's changing. It's changing really rapidly. You have people that have nothing and say, I now have a chance. And think about if you grew up in the Philippines in the 70s and 80s, or the 60s, you had to deal with the Marcos regime. You've got a whole generation of people in the Philippines who just feel completely free. And their parents never had that feeling, and their grandparents surely never did. And they're just so excited. A company like ZipMatch was started in, and also very well funded, was started in Manila. It's a modern view on a real estate portal. That never could have happened 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All these people feel free. Now, some of the companies that were funded in the entire region will fail. They should fail. But just the fact that everyone feels like they're free enough to experiment and to do. I mean, the bottom line is, a startup company is really just a well-funded experiment, or a poorly funded experiment, depending on your perspective. But they're experiments.
Yeah.
But in the same way that a guy who opened a cobbler shop or a haberdashery in Boston in 1920, that dude was experimenting as well. His funding options were different, and his market was uniquely local. But he took the same risks. Is anybody going to buy my suits? Right? Or is anybody going to bring their shoes to me to get fixed?
Yeah, the usual problems.
Same thing, right? The only difference is today's market is bigger, faster, and more dynamic, I think. The advice I would give you is just create the most compelling content and be serious, right? Be serious. So things can like fad in and fad out, right? Like the first time a GoPro comes out, it's really cool to watch someone surfing. After a while, nobody really cares, okay? And think about it, all the other businesses that were built like that. So Flip was a video camera that came out. It came out like kind of at the right time, but kind of at just the wrong time. Cisco bought that company for $500 million because they didn't know the iPhone was coming out, and then the Android was coming. So everybody has a video camera now on their phone. Nobody has a really bespoke video camera. Right, so do something, do the future. And it's so hard to figure out what that is, but don't do what everybody else is doing today. Do what nobody else is doing, and what's so hard to do, and then just do it better than everybody else, right? In other words,
I know, but this is what I'm asking you. What do you think it is?
make the best content. There's a voracious appetite for good content out there. Just make it. Just make it.